Welcome to Mrs. True Crime. Today's video is an in-depth look into Necrophiles Kevin Davis and Kenneth Douglas. It's a tale of abuse and senselessness. If you're triggered by anything dealing with death and or rape, feel free to click off this video. Perhaps check out a kitten video for some lighthearted content. If not, I'm Nicole. Let's get started.
So when you dragged her to the living room, to the bedroom, you kept on hitting her there?
Yeah, kind of.
That's when you reached in and grabbed her brain?
Yeah, I kicked out of the bed. Then I just, that was kind of silly, but then yeah, I just decided to reach in and kind of just...
On March 26, 2014, in Corpus Christi, Texas, 18-year-old Kevin J. Davis brutally killed his 50-year-old mother, Kimberly. But what's most discussed about this crime isn't her death, but what came afterwards.
And then what did you do after that?
Then I had sex with her corpse, actually.
This was just the first time?
Oh yeah, I lost my virginity to a corpse.
For 16 years, between 1976 to 1992, Hamilton County, Ohio morgue worker Kenneth Douglas battled alcoholism and drug addiction. When he was drunk or high, his sexual urges became uncontrollable.
I signed her in and bagged her hand and all of that, and I believe she was dressed like that. I'm not for sure if she was in a body pouch or was she wrapped up in a blanket. I really can't say, but I do remember going in the freezer, pulling in one of the rooms in the back.
Okay. And what happened?
I had sex with her.
Kevin and Kenneth both fall under the 10 classes of necrophilia. Which class I can't exactly determine. The classes, according to the Journal of Forensic and Legal Medicine, are as follows. Class 1. Role-play necrophiles. Those who are sexually aroused by a living partner pretending to be dead. They don't actually want to have sex with a dead person. Class 2. Romantic necrophiles are grief-stricken people who would mummify a portion of their recently departed's body and keep it in order to have a psychosexual stimulation. However, their interest in the deceased is limited to only the one they hold/held a romantic connection with. Class 3. Necrophilic fantasizers have erotic fantasies about the dead. They may visit cemeteries or funerals and may masturbate or have sex in the presence of the dead. Class 4. Tactile necrophiles. Erotic stimulation of touching a corpse, which may involve the breasts or sexual organs of the dead. Class 5. Fetishistic necrophiles. Cut up parts of a stranger's corpse, mummify it, and keep it for sexual gratification. Class 6. Necromutilomaniacs. Mutilate a corpse while masturbating. Class 7. Opportunistic necrophiles. Though they are content having sexual intercourse with the living, would not be opposed to intercourse with the dead. Class 8. Regular necrophiles. Preference for sexual intercourse with the deceased. Though they can stimulate pleasure from both living and dead, they do not enjoy living partners. Class 9. Homicidal necrophiles. Much like the classes before, they can stimulate sexual pleasure from the living. But for them, the desire to have intercourse with the dead is so great, they must kill in order to have a suitable sexual partner. And Class 10. Exclusive necrophiles. They can only have sexual intercourse and pleasure with the dead. According to Sex Info Online, necrophiles make up approximately 5% of the population, though the number may be inaccurate because of the secrecy of the act. The website further states that necrophiles may seek out corpses because they, quote, cannot reject, disagree, manipulate, or abuse them, unquote. This sentiment has raised the question on whether or not corpses can consent, asking if they are viewed as property or people. For the families of Kimberly Hill, Charlene Abling, April Hicks, and Karen Range, they are people with a past, a present, and an unfinished future. Prosecutor Kim Gonzalez describes the crime scene in the 4300 block on Castores Road as, quote, something out of a movie, unquote. Police found Kimberly Hill's body undressed from the waist down and posed. She'd been strangled and her head bashed in approximately 20 times. Kimberly was a hospice carrier, devoting time to those facing life-limiting illness or injury. According to National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization.org, the belief is that, quote, each of us has the right to die pain-free and with dignity, and that our families will receive the necessary support to allow us to do so, unquote. Though her career focused on others' final days, she didn't know what to think when her son Kevin announced he was entering his own last days. Kevin asked his mother for permission to die, stating he was, quote, worried with life and hated other people, unquote. Kimberly was emotional about her son's request and told him that it was ultimately his decision to do what he wished. This response wasn't what Kevin wanted, it seems, as afterwards he snapped.
I tried to strangle her with a cord, ripped the cord from a video game console controller. That didn't work. She was sitting on the couch watching TV. Okay. That didn't work out too well. She started screaming, and so I went to her room, opened a drawer at the very bottom to the right. I pulled out a hammer. I went back in the living room, and well, you kind of get the gist from there. And she was out pretty quickly.
After her murder and subsequent rape, Kevin waited around the house for his older sister Desiree, but she never showed up. Instead, he left a trail of blood from the living room to the master bedroom and wrote messages such as, quote, chase me, sorry for the mess, KD, unquote. Later, Kevin would tell investigators that he left the home because he had his fill of killing, and another murder would have been, quote, a little much, unquote. Figuring he'd leave town, he grabbed his backpack and bicycle, but eventually abandoned both in a bush by the train tracks. He walked the rest of the way to Robstown, about 23 to 28 minutes, according to Google Maps, from his home. In Robstown, he knocked on the home of an unknown couple and asked to use their phone because he just killed someone. He was immediately arrested. Learning what his grandson did, Clyde Hill had this to say.
It's just a sad situation. It's all uncalled for. I mean, he didn't have to do that. You know what I mean?
Yes, sir.
And I'm sorry. You just don't take your mother's life.
At the police station, Kevin began to tell investigators how he killed his mother, and furthermore what led up to it. He confessed to having homicidal fantasies about his sister and mother, and that his vision of a, quote, night to remember, unquote, would be decapitating a girl before having sex with her body in a dress. Detectives asked if he regretted killing his mother, to which he replied, quote, in a way, yes, but I wouldn't take back what I did. I did love her in a way. I'm a terrible, disgusting person, unquote. He continued that his mother was the best mother who didn't do anything to deserve her death. Davis declared that he deserved 100 years, claiming, quote, I'm not mentally disturbed. I'm sane. I know what I did, unquote. He pled not guilty to first-degree murder months later in June and turned down a 60-year jail sentence in a plea deal. His lawyers appealed for a lighter sentence, insisting Davis suffered from mental illness. Though an article affirmed the 18-year-old was diagnosed with a personality disorder, the prosecution argued there wasn't any medical evidence of any mental or emotional illness. The trial moved forward without the defense calling any witnesses. Prosecution played Kevin's confessional to the court and brought forth psychiatrist Dr. Joel Kutnick, who said, quote, he used a hammer to kill his mother, and of course the skull split open. He wanted to make certain that she was dead. He stuck his head in the skull and mixed up the brains. Then I think he told me he got a knife and mixed them up. Then he also said that it felt like putty, the consistency of the brain tissue. And then he said something about he tasted the brain, unquote. Kevin's video confession backed up the doctor's statements. During the trial, Kevin made light of everything around him. He popped his knuckles, stretched, smiled, and waved at witnesses as they identified him. It took jurors less than an hour for a verdict. Kevin Davis was sentenced to life in prison, October 2014.
And I told him, I said, we're down to one car. More often than not, I'm dropping Kenny off and I'm picking him up. And I'm taking him home. He gets undressed and he reaches up and Pat, whatever happens on county property and county time is county business.
In 1982, 19-year-old Karen Range was brutally beaten and stabbed by door-to-door salesman David Steffen. Her murder was so severe, she was nearly decapitated. When her body was examined for an autopsy, investigators found an additional piece of evidence: sperm. Karen had been raped. David was now in custody and admitted to convincing the virgin teen to let him in to demonstrate cleaning products before ending her life, but he firmly denied raping her. Without strong DNA testing, David was convicted for murder and rape and sentenced to death, but he appealed his conviction. As the years changed, so did modern technology, and DNA testing was more advanced than it had been in the 80s. As testing concluded, it was confirmed that the sample taken from Karen didn't match her killer. Instead, it matched a drug offender, Kenneth Douglas. But Kenneth was more than a drug offender. He was also a morgue attendant, one who handled Karen's body. While questioned, Douglas admitted to removing Karen's body from storage only 4 hours after she arrived. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison in 2008 for gross abuse of a corpse. David's sentence was changed from death to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The knowledge that Kenneth performed necrophilic acts caused an investigation into other cases and rape kits over the 16-year span of his career. As it would appear, Karen was not the first, nor the last. 23-year-old Charlene Appling was 6 months pregnant when Mark Chambers strangled her to death October 1st, 1991. Chambers, originally charged with murder, accepted the plea and was convicted of voluntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 to 25 years. He was paroled in 2000. In regard to Appling, Kenneth said, quote, "I do remember going in the freezer, pulling her in one of the rooms in the back," unquote, continuing on that he had sex with her. Later that year, 24-year-old April Hicks would fall, though other reports state she was pushed from a third-story window, dying from blunt force trauma, and will be yet another victim of Kenneth's. And Trinette Shirley, April's older sister, said the imagery of what Kenneth did to her sister would haunt her for the rest of her life. In a deposition in 2012, Kenneth admitted to having sex with up to 100 deceased women between 1976 and 1992 during his night shift in Hamilton County, Ohio. He said, quote, "I would just get on top of them and pull my pants down," unquote. Kenneth later said that he resigned out of fear of getting caught and that, quote, "my conscience was tearing me up on the inside," unquote. And though the mid-60-year-old takes responsibility for his actions, he blames the majority of his sexual cravings on drugs and alcohol.
If I wasn't drinking, I hadn't had anything to drink when I went to work, it wouldn't happen. Or I would do crack and go in, and I would drink and go in.
Kenneth Douglas grew up in a family of alcoholics, stating that at least 5 of his family members have had trouble with their marriages and law enforcement because of it. Yet, Kenneth has always been around death. Prior to his involvement with Hamilton County, he was a pallbearer and rifleman for soldiers killed in the Vietnam War. At some point, he became a morgue attendant for Hamilton County, and though his sexual deviances had put the morgue in the limelight, this was not the first time. In 2001, Thomas Cadogan was convicted on 8 counts of gross abuse of a corpse and was to serve a 2.5-year sentence. But Thomas wasn't a necrophiliac. He was, as he would put it, an artist. The, quote, artist photographed the deceased in different poses, often with props for a somber effect. Of his project, he said, quote, "I think in depicting death and using death as a subject matter as being brutally honest. I feel and felt very strongly I was capturing something that was going to happen regardless of my presence or not. In pursuing the project, I would and could put myself in the place of that person who was photographed and deceased," unquote. His lawyer, Louis Sirkin, added, quote, "is a subject matter that none of us really wants to think about. I guess that's the conflict artists have to go through when they take on a very controversial subject matter," unquote. Much like the families of the photographed, Karen Range, April Hicks, and Charlene Appling's families all believed Hamilton County were to blame for the unjustly behavior demonstrated by Kenneth. Though he was sentenced to 18 months each on 2 counts of gross abuse of a corpse in 2012, the families demanded more. Lawyer Al Gerhardenstein said, quote, "The county had plenty of notice that Douglas was coming to work and was present at work while he was under the influence of alcohol and drugs. Had he been stopped, these women would not have been abused," unquote. So, the families banded together and sued Hamilton County, then Supervisor Bernard Kersker, and former coroner Dr. Frank Cleveland, who died in 2011. Antoinette said the money wasn't why she was fighting. Quote, "It's about justice for my sister because she can't talk for herself. No one was there to help her," unquote. In 2012, a federal judge threw out some of the claims while allowing others, leading defense and prosecution to appeal, landing the case in the 6th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in Cincinnati. The defense argued that it wasn't anticipated that Kenneth would sexually abuse corpses, despite evidence stating otherwise. Greg Hartman, president of the Hamilton County Commission, remarked, quote, "Hamilton County, like any other employer, is not and should not be responsible for the criminal acts of an employee. The taxpayer should not have to pay money for the acts committed by criminals," unquote. The suit also claimed that other attendants did drugs and alcohol and even brought in visitors and fornicated on the premises. This lawsuit was the 4th the county faced for improper handling of a corpse. After 3 years of battling, a settlement was made in 2015. $800,000 was paid to the families, and additional non-economic terms are to be announced. At the time of the settlement, the families were pursuing a $2.45 million suit in damages from Kenneth. Lawyer Al Gerhardenstein had this to say, quote, "The sexual abuse of the bodies of these young women in the morgue was shocking and horrible. The families have fought for justice since they first discovered their abuse 6 years ago. They were ready for trial, but are satisfied that the settlement, including the non-economic terms, will help all of them find some peace," unquote. Despite my name being Mrs. True Crime, I don't like to discuss death in my personal life. I don't want to think about my friends or family or even me dying. I know it'll happen, but for now I like to play the avoidance game. But this has me thinking. When I die, I don't have any control over my body anymore. I mean, right now, I can walk to the kitchen if I wanted to. I could cut my hair or kick my leg just because. But when I'm dead, my body isn't mine anymore. According to laws, no one technically owns my corpse. But at the same time, I don't own myself. I have absolutely no control over what becomes my body from wherever I die to the morgue and from the morgue to the ground. Sure, I can leave a will, but that doesn't mean my body is 100% safe from harm. We only know of 5% that are necrophiliacs, but it's a taboo topic. The percentage could be higher. Kenneth Douglas got caught. Kevin Davis confessed. But what about the others we don't know about? Even in death, what percentage of us are safe? I'm Mrs. True Crime, and remember to be kind, be loud, be aware. For more information about Kevin Davis and Kenneth Douglas, why not check out some of these awesome links. And if you love what you saw and heard today, why not drop a like and a comment. Maybe subscribe while you're here. I make new videos every Wednesday, and you don't want to miss what's in store.